What happened to the chorus? I thought we were gonna do like a mixing one way of hi.
Hi. Welcome to In Frame.
Welcome to In Frame.
In frame.
Today, again, we have no guests, but it's all great. It's all good. We love all our guests, but today
Yeah.
I think we are focusing on a specific topic. I've been interested in heritage,
Oh.
but I have very little experience with heritage.
Okay.
And you both have some experience about heritage.
Do we know?
I mean,
We'll share something, I guess.
Yeah, so I
we'll
think
try our best.
I think then the question I've been wondering is, should architecture be permanent?
Oh.
And I think we can dissect it a little bit.
The question also is architecture permanent?
But why are we treating it like it's permanent?
Are we treating it like it's permanent though?
Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it. Yeah.
Let's talk
So what
about
is
it.
so okay, let's start from the basics. Like, what is heritage architecture or heritage within architecture?
I think if I should think at the top of my head, the definition of heritage, I think I will talk about heritage beyond just like, for me, architecture doesn't even come to mind when I think of heritage. Heritage is about my lineage, it's about my culture, it's about where I'm from, set traditions and cultures, that I follow, certain things that make me who I am. It's my heritage or our heritage, and this heritage, as a country, do we have a set heritage or do we have a series of heritages? I don't know if there's anything like that. But for me, the definition of heritage becomes something that is more about, society and the culture. And so architecture becomes almost like the last thing that comes to my mind when I think of heritage. So that's, for me, my understanding of what heritage is first. Before then, I'll have to connect architecture to it, which maybe we'll discuss.
Yeah, I think heritage is definitely what the first thing that also comes to my mind when it comes to heritage is essentially my ancestral kind of lineage. Like, where do I come from? Who am I? It's essentially tied to my identity to a certain degree, right? Heritage and identity have very strong links, and I think when I think about it now, same with Dixon. I don't think architecture is not the first thing that comes to my mind. However, because I teach history and theory, I have now got a very strong position
Heritage is.
of what the heritage of heritage in the realm of architecture. And essentially in the realm of architecture, it's mainly from a simplistic perspective about the preservation of certain buildings or certain structures that were created in a certain period or time with the means of I guess keeping that as a memorabilia, as a statement of identity, as a pause and a stop in time to also reflect. And it's to do with your memory, it's to do with preserving, and it's to do with kind of keeping intact the identity of the space that was formulated in that time and allowing people to learn from it.
So then, okay, great. I love that you guys are like connecting heritage as a personal like identity marker. So then why are we using that term heritage when it comes to architecture? Are we saying, for example, in South Africa, certain buildings are classified as heritage because I believe they've exceeded a certain amount of years? Um, is that a fair identity marker of that area or that region or of that time?
Well, your question is layered. Wait,
It is
let's
layered.
go back.
It
Let's
is
go
layered.
back. So the body responsible in South Africa for preserving or protecting such buildings that have been now identified as heritage building. They identify it as heritage building if they exceed, is it 60 years?
I think 60 years,
60
yeah.
years. So if they exceed 60 years currently, then they will be classified as heritage.
Yeah.
And there's a body that protects those buildings or say preserves those buildings. And then maybe Dixon, you can add to that.
Yeah, I think you like the fact that we're talking about this idea of heritage as a personal thing, as a cultural thing, and how are we now connecting like architecture to it. I also find it's also a question that I also ask myself a lot about, and in asking that question, I always say, who actually classify if it's a year, if it's a number of years that classifies a building as heritage.
Yeah.
If there's a house that, if I buy a house and that house is 60 years old or more, and that house has no cultural, political significance
To you.
to me or even to the nation, because not every building has a cultural significance
Exactly. Yeah.
relevance. Why then is it termed as a heritage? Why do I have to go through the heritage processes if I have to change something on the building? So for me, actually, that whole term of heritage becomes very difficult for me to kind of connect it to architecture. I'm not saying that it's not there, and I'm not saying that it shouldn't be, but I think that maybe perhaps, I don't know, in my mind, maybe it should be like institutional buildings, you
Like
know,
banks,
or
libraries.
political buildings or whatever, but not like, I don't have to go through a process of heritage because I bought a house in the neighborhood somewhere and I need to renovate it, and because it's more than 60 years, it's heritage. Because in the next 20 years, how many buildings are going to be heritage?
Maybe the question should also then be, why is it important for us to remember those buildings? For instance,
Yeah.
a lot of the buildings classified as heritage buildings are Edwardian or Dutch, Reformed, or they are product of a colonial era.
Yeah.
Right. I would ask the question: why is it vital for us to remember?
I think, yeah. So there's a lot of words being thrown about like heritage, identity, remembrance. Those kind of things are all like part and parcel of the question. Like, what should be remembered,
Yeah.
and what should we learn from the past? So something like a colonial system or that era, there are certain things that we 100% should be learning from them. Do we learn? I think the question is, do we learn by keeping, or do we learn by interrogating, or do we learn in an even different kind of way? I think where do we draw the lines, or where are the lines fuzzy? I think there's a lot of
I think this
interest.
is a very, 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 very important conversation, and it's a very subjective sort of conversation. Everybody will have their own opinion, and I think some people might even get touched by other people's opinion. There are different thoughts. There are people who believe that I actually don't want to be remembered of this trauma, and that every building associated to this idea of colonial should be demolished and we start afresh. You know, so there are people who have that sort of view, and there are people that says no, it actually reminds us of our past. But not everything that reminds us of our past is a heritage. From my point of view, I think that there are things that growing up as a child, there are maybe some traumatic things that have happened to me, right? Or certain things that have happened in the family. That is not necessarily a heritage, right? But the fact that I know that my grandparents is this person, my whatever, my sister is whatever, that where I come from, those things are heritage. But if there's a way that we could take away trauma, I think then there should be that sort of opportunity to have that conversation, to say maybe this is not the way to remember. Maybe because if you think about African cities, right, and if you think about how it's been densified, right, urbanized, sort of African cities are kind of growing, right, and imagine most of these buildings are in a very, very prime areas. They're in places that development is moving, and then these buildings are there, right? And so sometimes the question is, in our time, is there a way that we can document this to remember it in a different way, and still find ways of satisfying the need of today? If the need of today is housing, for example, in an urban space or in a place that the housing is required, and then there is a building that is, I don't know, not used. It's an old post office or whatever it is, but it is classified as heritage. How do we think about the need of today and repurpose this building, whether it's been densified or whatever it is? Why can't we have those conversations and say that there's a need for us to remember, but do we only remember that which is physical? Or can we even remember that which is digital? You know what I mean? Can we document these buildings? Is there a way that we can document? Can we digitalize these buildings that we can still remember? We can still experience it in one way or the other without physically touching the building.
There's an interesting tour that you can partake in I believe it's in Italy, where you get on this bus and the windows are like digital, and then as the bus drives through the city, then then it's like virtual ancient Rome that you can experience while you're driving.
What the places used to be before.
Exactly.
That's beautiful.
So I think there is globally that there is a phenomenon happening like that. But why? And I get what I hear what you're saying is that there is a way to remember, but it sounds like we are fixed in a certain way.
Yeah.
And even within that certain way, it's divisive.
Yeah, I think when you're speaking about the act of remembering as divisive, is because I think what heritage assumes, or heritage not only assumes, but what heritage tries to capture is collective memory, right? They try to capture and preserve essentially the artifact, which is the historic artifact, which is the building, as almost a representation of collective memory of a certain time. And I think maybe the failures in that preservation is that collective memory does not represent the majority of the nation, because that memory actually represents essentially a minority, or it was a product of an era that was essentially oppressive, and because it is a product of an era that was oppressive, now that we've come into a new era that is trying to fight oppression in various ways, these buildings, I'll hold one up here, these buildings then become somewhat a collective memory of trauma. And I think we are not, as architects, we speak about it, but I think what the council that is existing in South Africa has limited us in doing is to actually making an impact and change within that council, within those regulations. I think we have a lot to say about heritage, but our arsenal has fallen short of being able to address the critical issues around the entire body, and how not even how the buildings are preserved, but why they are preserved, and which buildings. And I think because, like as you said, Dixon, there are two kind of schools of thoughts, where the one school believes that for the sake of learning and history and not repeating the past mistakes, etc., there's a myriad of reasons. There's a body of people that believe that, yes, regardless of how oppressive the memory is, we need to keep it as an artifact that represents the time, so that people can learn, and as time goes by, it becomes a physical archive, right? Now there's another school of thought where people have lived that have lived experience or have embodied experiences from those architectures, and those people would have a different kind of perspective when it comes to heritage buildings, because now they don't represent them. It has no cultural ties. It has no ancestral kind of nothing linking to the identity of the majority of the people living in that space. So I think I'm of the belief that there are ways of preserving that are not that are non-aggressive. And I think the ways of preserving that are non-aggressive are, because there's so many bodies that you almost feel like as an architect you have to satisfy. If you say I'm in the camp of demolishing, then you've got the sustainability camp saying you cannot demolish buildings. This is unsustainable. And energy, all of these, right? Which valid points. Then there's a school of thought that is in the preservation, and the building is now falling apart, and the council wants you to hold it up to the same magnitude and aesthetic that it was. So you cannot alter it differently.
Because that was one of my thinking. Like, if you gave an example of purchasing a home, and it falls within heritage, and yet it's falling apart. So now, because of exactly what Veronica is saying, is that you have to do like everything that you can to keep it in its original state. Yet it's not as sustainable as people think it really is.
Because you need, so the practicality of doing that, if you have a house and it's built in the 1940s, and there's no record of this house in the South African system, like in the council, in the South African council, there's no record, there's no photographic evidence. How are you actually then supposed to preserve it to its original when it's no longer, because of dilapidation? And I guess I feel like the act seems theoretically viable, but the reality of it is that it's actually not possible.
I mean, the council, I mean, I think in every neighborhood or every area there's a representative of Prague, that if you have to go through that process, you have to kind of show them what you're thinking of doing, and kind of give reasons of why you're changing certain facade, how many, what percentage can be changed, and all those kind of stuff. And it has to go through all this process to be approved, to either be approved or not approved. But for me, it goes back to the thinking of maybe perhaps it's almost like how certain sites are classified as heritage by UNESCO or whatever it is. For me, I think it's maybe that exercise can be done where that certain buildings should be identified, that it doesn't have to fall to every building, every home, or every whatever that gets to a certain year now have to go through, has become heritage. I think that, I mean, this is a true story, right? There was a project that I was doing. We submitted the drawings to the council, and then we got a feedback to say you need to do a consent application because the client was doing a second sort of dwelling, So it took time because we have to engage town planners. So now it took time for us to do that application. We did that application. That application was approved. But our previous application was still in the system, right? Our previous application was not approved yet because of the consent use, but it was in the system. It was on the system. So now the time that we got the consent approved, the same project, which was 59 years, the project was 59 years when we did the first application. A year later, when we had gotten all the town planning applications to support the proposal, they asked for heritage. Do you understand what I'm saying? Now they're saying to us, your building is now under heritage. You need to apply for heritage. But why do I need to apply for heritage? My application was already in. But now it's changing the whole thing. The whole proposal needs to kind of be relooked at and all those things. So for me, I think I don't know, it's very difficult for me to think about.
But to your point, Dixon, I think we need to start as architects, we need to start discussing the viability or even the possibility of trying to balance the act of conservation with development. There is a high demand in the city needing to produce housing.
Yes.
But at the same time, there's a high kind of regulatory process that prevents you from touching certain buildings in certain areas. And as time goes,
it's going to be
more of these buildings are increasing. So essentially, I think we are really heading for a very difficult time because there'll come a point where our land is occupied by all of these heritage buildings, and there's a demand because of population increases to develop. How do we develop in light of heritage? How do we progress? How do we innovate the landscape?
I believe there needs to be an application process to prove heritage. They can't just be, because it just sounds like there's this blanket heritage over South Africa that it's everything over 60 years, regardless, like in your example.
So you're saying they must have definitive kind of criteria?
Yes.
Okay.
Because then because if everything's special, nothing's special. If everything's heritage, then like you're saying,
exactly.
Yeah, that's what Jack Dixon is saying.
Exactly.
We're definitely gonna get into an issue, but if we had to idealize the greatest heritage situation, what would those criteria be?
So currently,
if we were to make a policy.
Currently, let's speak about the current policy first, and then we jump to 100%. The current policy determines that from a time perspective and like an age perspective, it's deemed heritage. And I think from that's where they base it off of. It's from time.
Is it only on time?
No, it's not only on time, but the basis is that it starts with time. So it starts with an age.
So once the time is there, then you are flagged.
Yes.
So once you're about to do any sort of development, and if that time is there, regardless of what the building is, you've hit the heritage thing.
Yeah.
And
now the second question
is what would be the idea?
What are the other? Before we go to the question, what are the other parameters for heritage?
I don't know. Maybe
there's so many.
Google a list.
No, there's so many. I think time is the biggest one.
Yeah.
Time is the biggest one. If we focus on time, I think that really does.
Time is,
and it's also aesthetically driven, right?
Yes.
So
the facade.
It's more, they're not too precious about the internal workings of the building. They're more precious about the shell. So it's about the altering of the shell, the way the building is formed, and how it's and what it looks like.
So we're really keeping up with the facade.
Yeah. Like, see what you did there.
We're really keeping up with the facade.
Yeah.
And I think then the question, before we get to the ultimate question, I think the question is then, what facade are we like trying to uphold?
It's the facade. It's the facade from the period that it was built in, with the people that were occupying the space in that period.
But that's not. But yeah. But this is. I think the question is, it almost okay. Even if you think about the time,
Yes.
that time, the time actually tells you the specific facade that needs to be kept.
Yeah.
And that facade is basically to remind us of the past.
Yeah.
Right? And that facade really is about the colonial times. It is really about that. And which is it's a very political.
It's very political.
Okay, let's take the politics aside for like.
Wait, how do we do it?
A second.
We can't take that.
Yeah, put it on the side.
Okay, let's hear you. Let's hear you out.
We live in a very rapidly advancing society.
Yeah.
Right? Technology is getting smarter and smarter every day. AI and all of it, kind of like watch previous episodes about AI. If we took a facade, right, in a neighborhood, any generic neighborhood in South Africa,
Yeah.
A certain type of home has been developed within that region, right? Certain facade. Let's take shading.
Yeah.
Shading has come and glazing has come quite a long way.
Yeah.
Why do we still need to have the same glazing? I don't know.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah,
like the
arches,
steel versus aluminium.
Those kind of things. Because if we're just going to be heritage at all costs, we are also ignoring any kind of advancement in building science.
Yeah.
There are loopholes in, for instance, in the Prague kind of assessment criteria. For instance, if the window frame needs to be replaced, they don't necessarily require you to replace it with the exact same window frame material. If you opt for aluminium, obviously the process is strenuous, as we know. However, if you opt for a different material, they're not opposed to that as long as the aesthetic is preserved.
Okay.
So the frame must still be arched.
If you are a heritage specialist,
you need to come visit us.
Yeah, reach out to us. We would like to have you on the platform in frame.
Yeah.
Because I think that even within aesthetics, there can still be advancements. Not just design aesthetics or visual aesthetics, but certain materiality. For example, like asbestos. People used to put asbestos in ceilings until we realized it was killing people.
Yeah,
it's toxic.
So even with materiality, certain paint polymers could possibly have advanced in all of these things. I get that there are loopholes. I get that there are loopholes for aesthetically pleasing, but yet it's still kind of within that confinement of the facade.
Yeah, it is. But why?
But why are we remembering something? Whose memory are we remembering? Number one. I know we're gonna now we're back to the politics. whose memory are we remembering, and why are we remembering that memory in a very specific kind of way?
So, can I say something?
Yes.
So I like precedent, right? Let's for a second entertain your previous question for a second. If there's other ways of remembering that don't necessarily are not, I'll say, as aggressive as how South Africa is remembering and preserving buildings at the moment. So in other countries, I'm not saying that these countries are perfect. I won't even name the countries. I'll just use them as precedent for now. In other countries, they would take the heritage building, and when it starts to dilapidate, let's just say in this corner, what they then do is they utilize that as an opportunity to attach
a new
moment and a facade to create then a whole, it's almost like an overall different experience.
Yeah.
So what then is preserved is probably
a moment.
This portion and this portion.
Yeah.
But the portion that's now becoming dilapidated does not need to be restored to its original form.
100%.
So essentially, what they are. So it's also like prosthetic architecture. So what they are relying on is the deteriorating process of which every building is going to go through eventually. As it deteriorates, because of the current times we're in, we shouldn't be necessarily trying to upholster it to its original intent. And I think that's something that as South Africans we need to start talking about, because at the end of the day, then how do we develop? For me, I think the biggest question is how do we progress when we are still stuck and freezing some of these buildings, and we're trying to freeze them as much as we can in time, whereas the world has developed alternative means of preservation. I'm not for completely demolishing everything because I hate it all, but I think there's a way that we are unfortunately not able to tap into yet because our regulations are so strict, and I say aggressive. And I think as an example, I favor prosthetics because prosthetics allow you to restore its function, but not necessarily to the same aesthetic or the function of that. So you can, if a column is dilapidated and broken, you can restore a column, but it does not need to look like what it was before. And that's what a prosthetic is. So I think prosthetics, adaptive reuse, there's so many terms that we can use as ways of addressing this heritage thing in a new way of thinking for South Africa specifically. Other countries are obviously way ahead and have been doing it for a couple of years now, but we need to start thinking about this.
I really, really think that this idea of heritage is a very interesting topic, because the question again is, whose heritage is it, and who decide what the heritage is. And for me, from the onset of this conversation, when I try to define what heritage is, and if you look at the majority of the people in this country and their heritage, and if you think about the things that we're trying to preserve, the buildings that we're trying to preserve, then for me, I think that there should be an inquiry of actually what should be classified as heritage. And so that when we know that these things are classified as heritage, then it's not just about the years. Because for me, that number thing, somebody sitting at the council doesn't look at anything else. He just look at the number. He just look at the plan, look at the dates on the plan, and just tell you this is heritage, right? And therefore you have to go through certain processes. And I think that conversation needs to be had. There needs to have a conversation to say, actually, what do we classify as heritage?
Maybe it even starts at the term, right? We spoke about it. You mentioned it earlier that when you think of heritage, you're thinking of culture, all of these things. Maybe from the term heritage assigned to the certain buildings that we've seen, maybe that's where the problem actually begins.
Exactly.
And maybe we shouldn't call it a heritage building, but maybe it's just a historic artifact. And the moment we kind of loosen the grip of it being assigned to a heritage identity, we start to then now, if we start to realize that this is actually a historic artifact, the same way there's many historic artifacts that are in this country. And I'm using historic artifacts as just as an example of how we could start to reterm and rephrase some of these elements. I think then from a naming perspective, we can start entering into the conversation.
Can actually open the door for conversation.
Open the door for conversation, because if we can say, as architects, the term heritage is problematic. It's problematic because it actually excludes the majority of the nation in what it is that is being preserved. It's highly divisive. And we can't say that this is heritage, because heritage to whom,
Yeah.
it's most likely more alien than heritage.
Exactly. Like when I think about, I mean, I've driven through some of South Africa's like really nice landscapes and rural areas, and you see these really sort of nice traditional buildings, and who is concerned about keeping those? You know what I mean? Like if you're talking about heritage, then if you're talking about, you know, if you're talking about heritage as something that is connected to our culture, something that is connected to time, no one is saying the touch house, the rendezvous, and all those things should be kept. You know what I mean? Like, but it's also part of the heritage.
Yeah.
You know, so I think what you're saying for me becomes very interesting to say. Maybe the question of what really heritage is needs to be discussed. Maybe it's really about history, because it becomes a bit lighter actually. If I was told that we need to keep this building because it's a historic artifact. For me, it's a little bit lighter. For me, I kind of understand that, okay, there's a history to this. There's a reason why we're keeping this building. It makes a little bit of sense to me. And I sort of understand why we're keeping it, rather than to say it's heritage. Because then all the antennas begin to kind of come up and say, who's heritage? Why are we keeping it?
Especially in such a diverse country such as South Africa, I think the representation of these buildings become very monotonous, right?
Yeah.
I don't think they're representing the collective enough. And maybe that's why the question is actually quite pertinent, and it touches all of us in many ways, because I think it's an African issue as well.
Yeah.
Just in the continent of Africa.
It is.
In many other continents that were colonized, they probably attacking and addressing this issue differently. But not to say that the colonial discussion is only relevant here. I think it's actually, this is an international.
It is
an
actually.
international crisis.
Yeah.
Because in light of development, in light of even current modern day preservation, modern day archiving, what is it that we are saying? What are we saying about that? We actually sending, doing things the way that we've been doing, we're actually sending a message about today.
Yes, I think, and we can discuss what that message is, but I feel like there is just no thinking beyond heritage. Just saying, like you said, that's heritage. And there needs to be, like, obviously criteria. I mean, UNESCO has got certain criteria of what actually constitutes heritage, right? Not everything can be heritage, because like we said earlier, if everything's heritage, then there's no space for anything new to like be created within that space. And I think the historical artifact is more genuine in terms of, okay, this is a snapshot of that era. And we can all have discursive discussions about how that has affected us personally, but it's not everywhere.
Yeah.
Because if it's everywhere, then you're kind of alienating a certain people. So what I'm trying to get at is should there be a committee? I mean, surely Prague, right? Is that committee in South Africa that says, okay, cool, this is a historical artifact, but everything else around it can look like it. It may not, it doesn't need to. So why is it?
I think the one of the things that is happening is that this body then is attempting to curate the identity of South Africa.
Yeah.
Right? Because essentially once a human being foreign to the lands in South Africa, there is a narrative that these buildings are telling.
Yeah.
So I think the reason behind a lot of what we're talking about is because there's a message, there's a story that is being told through these buildings. And that story that's being told is either a great or a terrible representation of the reality of what South Africa is.
Yeah.
There's a narrative. And when you go back to now the criteria, maybe we can start to ask, okay, if we're going to now deem these buildings as historical artifacts, can we have a representational element, maybe per city, to represent that time? I don't know. I'm just saying that, like you're saying, it shouldn't be everywhere. We don't know. We there's a reason why a lot of museums have been failing. There's a reason why museums in general don't really do very well. All of these discussions are like adding to that discourse, is that, are we preserving well? Are we doing it justice in the way that we're doing it?
Yeah. I don't know. Like, for me, it's a very interesting, very controversial sort of topic.
Political.
And very political to talk about. You know, like, I just think, man, we need to find ways of archiving. I think we can remember in a different way. I think there's a way we can remember. I don't believe architecture should be permanent. It cannot even be permanent. And I think that, for me, I mean, my thinking is that when a society is in need of something, we need to think about how to respond to the need of the society in a sustainable way, whether that means to explore ways of reuse of a building, ways of breaking certain part of a building to attach something to it. Even if it means the demolition is to the greater good of the society, for me, I think it's about the times we are in, the needs that we need, and how do we respond to it as architecture, rather than thinking this cannot be touched. Let's find something else. What is the need of the society? For me, I think the need of the society today precedes the so-called heritage, because we learn from the books. We read about the historic events and the things that has happened, right? And so how do we build new heritage? Because heritage is not something that is created once. It's not fixed. So what we're saying basically is that this is the heritage, and we can't create new heritage. We can't create new things to remember, right? So in 50 years to come, what will we have created for other people to remember?
You know, and
That's a powerful one.
I'm just thinking about that and if I combine that thought with what Veronica's saying, is that museums are failing. What is that showing about the current generation? Because all they understand is this particular heritage is the only heritage. And like you say, beyond, let's say, the next 50 years, our generation, that generation will be like, no, it's only this one that was 100 years ago.
Yeah, there's nothing that we've created for them to remember.
It's basically saying that what we are creating now is insignificant in the greater scheme.
Yeah.
I think what a result of this, of what you're both saying, is in a scenario where, for instance, our Heritage Council maybe refuses to relax its standard, people will retrofit every single heritage building we're seeing today. And essentially, the retrofitting of these buildings will show the need for development, or the desire for development, and also it's like they're trying to alter it based off of now a technological desire. Maybe it's about placing HVAC in a building that in the 40s never had HVAC, for instance. Then they retrofit the HVAC in. Then maybe now the desire is, it needs to, because the family is growing, it needs to be 3 stories. Now, how do we create the 3 stories? The reality is that it's, without now changing the facade, now we're going to now retrofit an additional 2 stories, and the ground narrative will look interesting, but essentially we're trying to say that it'll never change. We're trying to say that we can't change.
Yeah.
We're trying to say that
No, exactly.
unless a natural disaster demolishes these buildings,
Which sometimes happens.
which sometimes happens.
But then it takes us to the point of being proactive.
Yeah.
And for me, I think that's where the digital world becomes very important.
Yes.
Imagine if we start documenting all these buildings digitally and kind of find a way that we can almost experience the building without touching it, you know? Because if you want to preserve something, if we wanted to preserve these things, we are trying to say that the only way that it can be destroyed is when an architect decides to demolish it. No, there are natural occurrences, as you said. Fire, which you've seen a lot of buildings in the city. Fire, whatever, can demolish it. And then what happens then? Where is the heritage? But if we are proactive and see where we are going, like the world is advancing. Why can't we find ways of remembering? I think for me, that would be my...
Because if we find certain ways, proactive, sustainable ways of remembering, it's also going to allow the next generation to also realize that their heritage is also important and worth remembering. Because if we're only fixing in a certain time, then we're not going to advance. And the next generation and the following generation are going to realize that the previous generation made nothing, quote unquote.
Didn't matter.
And I think with the overcorrection of everything matters is diluting what really matters. And that's our history matters. Like in the beginning, we talked about the lineage and your cultural heritage. That 100% matters. But it's about what we learn from it and where we go with it is truly what matters.
Yeah, because even pre-colonial.
What was that?
What was that? What was
But
that?
that's why it's a very political,
You know?
it's a political discussion, because a lot of it involves a political agenda. Without even trying to touch these many political agendas, I think it's important that we as architects kind of somehow we need to be responsible, to take a stance and be responsible with the power that we have as architects. We are not the developer and we're not the politician. And a lot of these laws are lying with the politician. However, I think there is a way that we can systematically start to realize and challenge some of these boundaries that have been set before us, and approach this. Maybe it's academia that changes it. Where we start questioning it in academia so that it actually reaches the politician. I don't know. But because the reason why we're in this dilemma, whereas there's countries I'll use as an example. Let's look at, I won't go into depth, but what happened in Kigali? What did they do? What have they been doing? What's their history? And is there a building to represent that history? Look, there's so many countries we can mention. Like, at the end of the day, there has to be a moment where we think, what is our responsibility as an architect? Because now we are obviously trained to apply the regulation that has been given to us. That's our training. That is what we are. We need to obviously obey the law. And I'm not trying to say that we should disobey the law. But we have to find a way as architects. Because we're responsible to a certain degree. We are responsible.
I don't, as interesting as this conversation is, I don't think we'll be able to solve all the issues within this discussion. However, hopefully it does shed some light on,
or spark some conversation.
And we're also open to correction from Heritage Council or
we would
anybody.
like to know.
We'd like to know. I think we're also learning as we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the great thing about this podcast and discussion is that we are not set or fixed on anything.
Yeah.
We are open to learn, and I think, and even myself, learning a lot about what heritage actually means.
I think we should actually, on a serious note, find a heritage specialist or consultant or whatever, and have a conversation with the person and try and find out what is the thinking behind this thing. Because also sometimes we get frustrated in the processes of heritage and all those things, and then maybe there's a deeper sort of reason why these things are there, and then we will be able to decode them. But this was nice.
This was great.
Thanks, Dixon. Thanks, Monica. Thanks for schooling me today.
We tried.
Thank you for watching, and we are
In
Brave.
Brave.